Hello and welcome to the fourth installment of Art in Flux at National Gallery. Tonight, the topic is reclaimed, and this is a very, very special event for us, both because it's reclaimed and also because we are now a good year into the pandemic and a year into our relationship with Art in Flux. And I'd like to just take this first moment to reflect a bit on the relationship between the National Gallery and this event. The National Gallery is literally a fortress. If you look at the way it's built very sturdily. It controls billions of pounds worth of artworks. And those thick walls not only represent a physical barrier to entry, they represent many social barriers to entry. The National Gallery was founded with a tradition of excellence, and it was always supposed to be the best art of the time. But as we know, excellence has been a fig leaf to cover a number of other barriers which have nothing to do with how good an artist is, how relevant an artist is, or how important their expression is to society. So I think this really brings to fore the difference between the history of the National Gallery and our partners in this event, Art in Flux. Art in Flux was founded in the 19th century tradition of the refuse salons. There would always be the salon in Paris, and eventually artists who were good but couldn't make it into the salon formed their own salon. At some point, those refuse salons became more important than the salon, in the same way that the Fringe Festival has now become more important than the Edinburgh Festival, arguably, in many terms. So I'd like to welcome Art in Flux. I'd like to welcome the guests that they brought for today's event. You're going to see some wonderful art and hear some wonderful discussions about how people are breaching the barriers between the establishment, which is represented, let's say, by National Gallery, and mediated by National Gallery X. But first, I'd like to go over some housekeeping. If we could just look at that. If you're not familiar with Zoom, there is going to be a moderated Q&A after the presentation. For questions, please just use the Q&A window. If you have any problems, please contact our moderator. And note that this section is going to be recorded, so please assume that you're giving permission for the recording. The recording is going to be available later. And finally, we'd like to thank Malia for giving us stage text captions so that everyone can be accessible. I'm going to hand the program over to Aphra Shemza. Aphra, over to you. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Ali. Good evening, everybody, and a very warm welcome to you all. I'm Aphra Shemza, and tonight I'm one of your curators and an artist also myself. So to introduce myself, I'm a multimedia artist who works predominantly with light, abstraction, and interactivity. My keen interest in modernism, my Islamic cultural heritage, creating art for all, and advocating for a more sustainable practice are all central themes within my work. With regards to today's theme of representation, my curatorial practice with Art in Flux centers around the championing of underrepresented groups within the media arts. And my most recent personal work, Shemza.digital, looks at how we might use digital participatory art as a way to educate for social change and decolonize the art world. I'm here tonight because I am one of 3 directors of Art in Flux. And for those of you who are new to a Flux event, Art in Flux was founded in 2016 by the artists Maria Almena, Oliver Gingrich, and myself. We are an artist-led community interest company for artists working on the intersection of art and technology. We were founded by artists for artists and have grown from a loose forum of 30 artists into a group of over 2,000 plus practicing artists, all working in the media arts. We have curated a platform for media artists to work with institutions. So far, we have worked with the V&A and National Gallery X and many universities such as Goldsmiths and the Royal College of Art. I will now hand over to my colleague, Maria Almena, who will give you a little bit more information about the activities that we get up to at Art in Flux.
Good evening, everyone. I'm delighted to be part of this event as a curator and a speaker. I'm Maria Almena, a multidisciplinary artist, director at Chematica Studio, and curator at Art in Flux. My practice combines live performance, interactive technology, and the human body in order to create transformative experiences that inspire reconnection with deep human emotions. I believe that contemporary art has a responsibility to contribute to societal change, and with my work, I'm hoping to share a more thoughtful and inclusive way of experiencing art. Now, I'd like to briefly share some of the events that Flux runs over the course of the year. Our socials provide an intimate and supportive environment for our media art community. They are focused on a peer-to-peer approach and are hosted to encourage networks and collaborations between our artists. We also have largely curated talks events that allow us to bring key themes from the media arts community to the general public. For previous events, we've partnered with organizations such as Royal College of Art, Laser London, and Central St. Martin's. Last year, we were honored to confirm National Gallery X as our partner for our larger talks events. In 2020, we created 3 events: Gender Tag, focused on gender and media arts; Levitation, presented media art practice in the context of health and well-being; and Shifting Ground, explored media arts and cultural heritage. Recording of these events are available online on the Art in Flux and National Gallery website, so have a look if you are interested in these topics. Now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Olive Gingrich.
Thank you, Maria. My name is Olive Gingrich. I'm a co-founder of Art in Flux. I'm a media artist and a researcher focusing on mixed reality, visual sound, and neuroart. Together with the art collective and Almena group, we're examining the relationship between sound and vision. And as a researcher, I'm investigating participatory art practices at the National Center for Computer Animation. Currently, I'm working on real-time visualizations on brainwave activities with my colleague, Dr. Sharma Raman, which we're excited to launch tonight at the Reclaimed exhibition. With Art in Flux, we responded to the need for more virtual live events this year. And to this end, we created a new forum for live performances, Flux Live. Recordings of Flux Live, supported by the Arts Council England, are now accessible via our Art in Flux YouTube channel. Our workshop program makes our artistic practices accessible to the wider public, and we're excited to have developed new online workshops in 2020 and 2021. And to profile pioneering, groundbreaking media artists, Art in Flux regularly curates exhibitions. Our very first exhibition at Ugly Duck turned into a small festival. And in 2019, we were invited to co-curate the Event 2 exhibition, celebrating 50 years of the Computer Art Society. And last year, our annual exhibition was part of the Ars Electronica Festival and the Digital Weekender at the Watermans, curated by my colleague Maria Almena. And tonight, we will be launching our newest virtual exhibition, Art in Flux Reclaimed.
Art in Flux is very excited to present Reclaim, an event reclaiming visibility for diverse voices within the media art world, providing a bridge between artists and art institutions. Curated by the 3 co-founders, we invite artists, curators, and activists, Aminder Virdee, Ashokkumar, Mistry, and Helen Starr, to discuss platform cultivation, art communities, and the reclaiming of a space for underrepresented groups. The need to discuss curatorial strategies around representation is now more important than ever, and this event will discuss how today's curators and artists are celebrating diversity. While UK art institutions continue to address issues around representation and diversity, inequalities remain in their collections and programs. What role can independent art organizations play to facilitate a greater representation within these spaces? Independent art organizations are focused on supporting specific communities, creating a direct connection with them, and making it easier to respond to these communities' needs and changes. Therefore, we believe independent art organizations are going to play an important role in achieving true diversity within the arts. Art in Flux was born as an underground project run by 3 independent artists who belong to marginalized groups: women in tech, LGBTQ, and diverse cultural heritage. Working in a non-industry to be white men-dominated, we had to face many challenges due to being outsiders. We wanted to create an art community as we believed we were stronger as a group, So creating a supportive and inclusive space was always at the core of our ethos. Due to the lack of other UK organizations championing media arts from underrepresented groups, we decided to make this our focus. Reclaim is our first official event dedicated to this ethos. We believe diversity is key for the art world, helping us to have a wider, open mind to different perspectives, which only enriches our culture. And we want to highlight the importance and relevance of the diverse topics these groups bring to the art discourse. We also want to reclaim a space for marginalized groups to be in the center of the city, as usually they get pushed out. Flux has always fought for keeping a space in the heart of London where we can bring our ideas to the influencers of our society to inspire inside-out changes.
Thank you, Maria. It can certainly be said that cultural institutions within this country lack a lot where equal representation is taken into account. Very few minority groups are represented in their collections, programming, exhibitions, and even in their staff members. But things are changing. Institutional changes can often take a very long time to come into effect. And with Art in Flux, we're very lucky as a small organisation to be autonomous. We can adapt and change to the current climate we find ourselves in from month to month. The challenge for institutions now is about reinterpreting their collections for a contemporary audience and looking at how they can foster new conversations about art and life within our current political context. The National Gallery are facilitating just that by partnering with King's College and Google Arts and Culture to create the National Gallery X. And we're so delighted to be on that journey with them together. We're exploring the work of their collection with their brilliant curators to create these events as seen through the lens of the media arts, an underrepresented art form itself. I think our relationship with NGX is a brilliant example of how an institution can work alongside independent arts organisations to champion underrepresented art forms and also minority groups. Whilst I was looking for images for the political context that we're living through at the moment, I found this one on the left here, and I thought it was really poignant because here we can see the National Gallery as the backdrop for the Black Lives Matter protests that happened last summer. And this to me really highlights how these spaces, places, and ideals are all interconnected and why what we're discussing tonight is so relevant in the current climate. With nationalism increasing in the UK, fueled by Brexit and political and economic migration, and calls to decolonise history following the Black Lives Matter movement, the British landscape is an increasingly polarised one. I believe it is now more important than ever that we celebrate the rich and diverse voices in the arts as a way to bring society together. We, the Art in Flux co-founders, are all from minority groups ourselves, so inherently we have always championed these voices through our curation. But the Black Lives Matter movement last year really inspired us to strive for equal representation, not just for Black artists, but artists from all minority groups. The movement also utilised the new social technologies of today to reach the masses and educate for social change. We really believe that technology has the power to bring us together instead of propelling us apart. And that is what we're doing with our programming this year.
Tonight's event and accompanying exhibition Reclaimed are part of a larger discussion towards inclusion and diversity. As the art world is experiencing a shift towards the digital, Reclaimed advocates that marginalized groups are at the forefront of this debate and not just an afterthought. As the report by the government's disability champion for the arts highlights, disabled people are exceptionally impacted by the pandemic due to threats to health, livelihoods, and social care. According to the Office of National Statistics, people who are deaf, neurodiverse, or have learning or physical disabilities make up 21% of the UK population. Yet only 5% of NPO chairs and 12% of audience members are falling into this group. And while disabled and neurodiverse artists have long suffered from underrepresentation in the art institutions in artistic and curatorial representation, some of the most creative use of technology in the arts comes from their contexts. But this exhibition and talk are also learning curve for Art in Flux, as we learn to use access technology and to think about access and inclusivity when designing and curating virtual exhibition spaces. For us, this is the beginning of a process too. Last year, Art in Flux hosted Gender Tag, an event with the National Gallery X, which I was honored to curate. Gender Tag focused on media art and gender and highlighted the myriads of creative possibilities for media arts to break up binary norms of representation. And while progress is being made with major exhibitions at Tate Britain, Science Gallery, or the Barbican focusing on gender in all new ways, LGBTQIA artists continue to be framed frequently through the prism of either over-sexualized representation or tragedy. Alana Shu's study into the representation in US museums sheds an uncomfortable light on how LGBTQIA artists are often framed through stereotypes and stigma. We're proud to say that a majority of artists participating in the reclaimed exhibition identify as LGBTQIA, presenting diverse queer artistic positions that reach beyond binary representations of gender.
Now, I'd love to start with the launch of our new virtual exhibition, Reclaim, an exhibition funded by the Arts Council of England that will be open to the public for a month starting today. This exhibition is curated by Flux Co-founders and is featuring some very talented radical artists that we will be shortly introduced. The exhibition is held in a bespoke virtual exhibition environment created by Christopher McKinnon. The gallery space has been inspired by the architecture of a number of key institutions, such as the roof of the British Museum. And it has been placed in the center of Trafalgar Square as a way to reclaim this central space within the City of London for the unrepresented in society, intending to highlight our importance in the building of a new world post-COVID. This exhibition is reclaiming the importance of having diverse artistic discourses. Some topics discussed at this exhibition are what it means to be a woman, experience of transitioning, the beauty of non-conforming gender canons, the decolonization of the art world where everyone can be an artist, the therapeutic power of the arts, and the celebration of neurodiverse ways of being. I would like to start by introducing the work of the talented neurodiverse artist, Natasha Trotman. She is presenting Neuromnemonic, an interactive film work that explored the borderlands between the mainstream and neurodivergent intangible spaces. Our other talented neurodiverse artist is Aminder Virdee, who is also a speaker at this event. She is presenting Exomatic Echoes, and she has utilized her own medical archive of scan and biomedical data to create an audiovisual work as a form of activism, articulating neurodivergent pains and rituals. Across major national and international arts institutions and galleries, deficits in representation of women remain. According to the National Museum of Women in the Arts, 51% of visual artists today are women. Yet, in London, 78% of the galleries represent more man than women. Art in Flux champions pioneer woman in tech, aiming to readjust remaining imbalance across the media arts. As the many talented women in tech artists don't get the visibility they deserve, we are at Influx are determined to change this. Our exhibition is featuring the provocative Camille Baker's work, Inter Her, exploring internal works in the context of post-reproductive disease and the pain experienced by women over 40. Inter Her is an intimate and haunting experience, helping the viewer to understand these issues.
In Danielle Brathwaite-Charlie's interactive artwork, We're Here Because of Those Who Are Not, the artist has archived the existence of a group of Black trans people to highlight their lived experiences. Danielle Brathwaite-Charlie, working alongside a group of Black trans people, created Testament of Appreciation, archiving the experiences and weaving the life stories into a lasting legacy. The Black Trans Archive reacts to the identity and choices of those who enter. And with this, it becomes a very personal experience, an eye-opener for what it means to be living as a Black trans life, We're Here Because of Those Who Are Not is not just a serious game, but a powerful masterpiece of media art. And in Rogue Greengrass and Maddie James' Down There the Sea Folk Live, the artists explore male trans experiences in their film about gender transitioning and singing voices. The documentary echoes the metaphor of Hans Christian Andersen's The Little Mermaid, in which a mermaid sacrifices her voice for the gift of transformation. Previously launched at the London Film Festival, the film transcends the experience of trans masculine performers and their complicated relationships with their voices and stage personas. The film is lyrical, poetic, and important in following the trajectories of these young artists with personal and intimate storytelling that contributes to deeper understanding of trans male experiences. The Pantheon of Queer Mythology by Enrique Agudo narrates the story of 4 deities representing existing issues for queer people in Western societies today, issues that might go unnoticed or are overlooked by mainstream culture. Underneath evocative and powerful worlds lay issues such as expectations of masculinity and body dysmorphia, internalized misogyny and homophobia, dissonance of gender identities, racial imbalance and discrimination, or the pervasiveness of transphobia from within the queer community. The Pantheon of Queer Mythology has already won multiple awards at film festivals around the globe, and we're so very excited to share this masterpiece with you as part of Reclaimed. And finally, in mine and Sharma Rahman's artwork Brainfuck, gender-fluid bodily experiences are abstracted as a continuously changing representation of flow mental states, states of heightened creativity measured using AI-based classification systems. A 3D body scan of the artist is abstracted and distorted through these brainwave parameters. Brainfuck explores sensuality and body-mind relationships as an amorphous, ethereal 3D sculpture.
We, the Art in Flux co-founders, also present our work as part of the exhibition. In mine and Stuart Batchelor's project, Shemza.digital, we asked the public to become actively involved in art making by creating their own digital paintings. We use digital participatory art as a way to decolonize the art world, whilst highlighting the importance of migrant voices within British art history, most specifically my grandfather's work, Anver Jalal Shemza. Shemza.digital also invites the public into the gallery by exhibiting their work as a way to reclaim the gallery space and make art accessible to all. Kimatika's art piece, Transcendence, is an interdisciplinary art research project exploring how live performance and interactive technologies can induce altered states of consciousness. Transcendence VR is a 360 video and a 3D performative sculpture that reclaims a space within the arts to talk about these transcendental ideas to fill a lack of spiritual connection in our society. It's creating a contemporary ritual for accessing the subconscious mind that inspires reconnection with deep human emotions and the spiritual world. Zeitgeist, created by Olive Gingrich and Sharma Rahman, uses deep learning algorithms to indicate flow, turning the artwork into an interface of creative collaboration. Flow is a mental state of increased creative stimulation, reduced stress, and increased relaxation. Using AI-based classifications, Zeitgeist represents the flow mental states of the artists whilst they were creatively collaborating during the UK national lockdown. Creative engagement can help people to socially connect with one another. Zeitgeist highlights the potential of participatory media arts for societal transformation, health, and well-being. So do go and check out our exhibition after the event and explore all the artists and their works. We'd like to thank the incredible artists for allowing us to exhibit their work, and to Christopher McInnes for his work designing the exhibition. So we're now going to move through to have some presentations from our guest speakers this evening, Helen Starr, Ashokkumar Mistry, and Aminder Virdee. After which we'll have a panel discussion. And if you have any questions for the artists at all, please do write them in a chat and we'll endeavour to answer them at the end. I would now like to welcome Helen Starr as our first speaker. Helen Starr is an Afro-Carib curator, producer, and cultural activist from Trinidad. Being Indigenous Carib, Helen is interested in how digital art forms transform our understanding of reality by world-building narratives through storytelling and counter-storytelling. Welcome, Helen.
Hello, it's such an honor to be here. So Indigenous Trinidadians, Caribs such as myself, are called submayan by Western thinkers who have tried and failed to understand our alien cosmology. In Sanskrit, Maya also means the magic power of illusion. This is a forthcoming project I'm working on with the amazing Seema Mattu, a Valmiki artist. This work, Seema calls a fan fiction of self, and it is about her particular culture, ethnicity, and a lot about what's happening at the moment for diaspora people. In Ontologies of the Caribbean Sea, a publication that I brought out with Quad last year, I wrote, in Eye of the Vortex from Neurons to Self, Colombian neuroscientist Rodolfo Linus writes, the brain generates different models of reality. The only reality that exists is already a virtual one. We are dreaming machines that construct virtual models of the real world. This is some of the thinking that we're grappling with within the artworks, which I'm lucky enough to be helping to produce with the amazing artists who I work with. This is a work which really delves into a particular aspect of Black aesthetics within filmmaking. There's a quote here from Ramesar, who's a famous Trinidadian filmmaker. And he writes, us to be, light is the main spirit in cinema. The idea of Caribbean incorporates my new terminology of the ielect, the visual dialect, the things that we, the things that we, and then that we see without eyes. This is by the amazing Somalian artist Salma Noor, who I've the pleasure of working with this year, developing and learning and making works together. The works I describe as threshold experiences. This is a clip, it's a fan artwork which pays homage to the true cyborg queen, Missy Misdemeanor Elliott. And Salma pulls from her own culture, rethinking and remaking myth and stories. This is a myth from Somalia from the 1778 BC. Nothingness can be understood as the threshold which divides the reign of the illusion from that of truth. Oh, this was the most wonderful project, Warm Worlds and Otherwise. It toured 3 galleries. It was by the beautiful Anna Bunting Branch. This created a safe space for Anna Alia and myself. It allowed us to articulate our thoughts and feelings around colonialism, gender oppression, and futurism from our particular perspectives and shared histories. This was a virtual reality work. It's another work of fan fiction. It's a homage piece to 3 amazing feminist thinkers. One of the thinkers, Naomi Mitchison, she writes, I think of my friends and the fathers of my children. I think about my children, but I think less about my 4-day normals. then I think about Viola and I think about Ariel. Viola is a haploid human conceived as a result of sexual interaction with the Martian, Martians being hermaphrodites. Ariel is an alien creature that could be seen either as a parasite or a kind of child. You can see the work that this was the virtual reality piece, and this was the staged structure, which sadly only opened for 2 weeks, but it's designed for wheelchair access. It's a moving sound piece where you can lie or sit or wheel on it, and the sound moves through your body. I'm currently working, my big project for this year, I'm currently working with Danielle Braithwaite-Shirley, whose work is in the Art in Flux exhibition. I'm co-curating a work with Danielle with the amazing Peter Bonnell at Quad. And I can summarize the main themes of my practice as radical feminism and critical race theory, virtuality and information theory, animism, and the degodding of nature.
Thank you so much, Helen. It is now my great pleasure to introduce our second speaker. Ashokkumar Mistry is a multidisciplinary artist and writer working in the UK for the past 25 years. Ashokkumar Mistry works across visual art forms, performance, and moving images, and was commissioned by the BBC and presented a participatory art installation for the South Bank Centre. Ashokkumar Mistry also co-developed an exhibition in Taiwan for the National Cheng Kung University and presented at the Next Art Tainan Festival. Ashok is currently associate artist with DAO and a fellow of the International Association of Art Critics. We'll now show you a short video of one of Ashokkumar Mistry's artworks. Here we dance invisible to space and time.
Good evening. Thanks to Art in Flux and the National Gallery for this opportunity. When I started my career 25 years ago, the most difficult aspect of entering the arts was to understand myself. After years of being called a coconut by my friends and family for choosing to study art, suddenly I was being called an Asian artist, a stereotype I was adamant on avoiding. I was already working with digital and would have to correct people when referred to as an Asian artist. The look of puzzlement when I explained my practice as new media is priceless. But even so, during commissions, I was often asked to make things look a little more Bollywood or Indian-y. It's absurd that 25 years after having, 25 years on, I'm still having to talk to you about these themes. Diversity is something being interpreted by some as internationalism, which seems to suggest that most mainstream galleries want to make sure that they can send their brown artists back home to where they came from. There is no value for second and third generation artists unless we talk the exotic talk. The advice of one of the few brown artists who recently won a major film award was, you need to embrace your exoticism because that's what curators like. There is an expectation to code switch, and the problem is not everyone can do so. There is an expectation to code switch, and the problem is not everyone can read social codes. I examined the artists of color that have struggled to get a foothold in the art world, and worryingly, I found that all of them were either neurodivergent or disabled. So there are intersecting barriers being placed in front of disabled neurodivergent media artists of color. Around 5 to 6 years ago, I created one of the first data-driven performances. My core innovation was a performative system through which ASCII data from Twitter was passed. There's a diagram of it here. After creating the first iteration of the work, I approached performance arts organizations and was surprised that despite them praising the work as before its time and cutting edge, none were forthcoming to support the work. Most tried to understand the work as Asian. Besides, the work did contain a tabla player. One CEO from a diversity-led organization said, "It's good to see you. It was good to see me working with my heritage," while a director of a mainstream org tried to steer the conversation towards Indian cinema. The extensive body of generative work titled "If All the World Was Binary" does explicitly explore racism, and every time I approached galleries to show the work, I've been redirected to the same diversity-led organization who have already rejected the work. Most of the work I create remained on a hard drive without seeing the light of a gallery because I refuse to be seen as a strange fruit, defined through other eyes. So to the sector, I would say, where's the ladder?
Thank you so much for your fascinating introduction, Ashokkumar. I believe it's very important to facilitate spaces for neurodiverse artists to express how to best represent them. They need to lead the way, and we have to help them to achieve their vision in order to create an art world truly diverse. Now, I would like to introduce our third and last speaker, Aminder Virdee. She's a British South Asian artist, writer, activist, and trustee at the UK's leading disability-led live music accessibility organization, Attitude is Everything. She's also the founder and president of Disabled Intersectional Voices in the Arts, a disability-focused network currently based at the UAA. I will hand over to you now, Aminder.
Thank you, Maria. It's incredible to be here, and I'd like to thank Art in Flux for approaching me for this exhibition. So I view my artistic practice as a kind of solar system with many worlds, and the galaxy of my practice as a creative resistance. My very being here, existence is resistance, especially against the multiple intersectional oppressions that I face: racism, ableism, sexism, classism, ageism, and sexualism. I identify as a disabled, neurodivergent, chronically ill, brown South Asian woman, a child of the diaspora and from a low socioeconomic background. My lived experience and activism informs and navigates my practice through an intersectional and autoethnographical lens. This current piece on the screen was my first work and dabbling into media arts. Keep this leaflet, you may need to read it again. Touches upon that as a disabled person, I've been subjected to the medical and clinical gaze from birth to present, as well as the diagnostic gaze, which is not only confined to medical spaces. It is what Rosemary Garland Thompson, a disability scholar, defines as the unspoken question behind the stare that inquires, what happened to you? This is a question that seeks to affix a diagnosis to a disabled person, to safely categorize them as other. This work specifically invites you to stare. Next slide, please. In Residence of Basanti, I move away from disability and focus more on my race and ethnicity in combination with physics of sound. As a disabled South Asian woman, my disabilities are seen first, and I'm expected to create work only on disability. This can be really frustrating, as no one is single identity, and we are all intersectional on some level. So this specific piece was a series of ancestral, performative, oral and visual translations of mechanical oscillations and Faraday waves. These waves and vibrations were conceived during ritualistic mixed Indian practices that were performed by myself and a classmate. During the event, spectators were encouraged to participate and learn about sound-based fluid dynamics and North Indian sound practices. The last video seen in the stills on the screen are a part of the Kaleidosskeleton series that were created throughout the first and second lockdown. As an activist, this work traverses radically inclusive politics and articulates lifelong pain. As an activist, we are sometimes put on a pedestal of strength and the inspiration porn stereotype. This work aims to show disability in all its beauty, the pain, the resistance, the creative skills that we have that non-disabled people don't, the skills to completely adapt to any circumstances instantly and problem solve. The project assembles as an unapologetic public testimony and an embodied STIM. Stimming refers to the neurodivergent act of self-stimulatory, repetitive, sensory and bodily behaviors. I utilized transmedial programming and code and my own X-rays to create the Kaleidosskeleton videos. The video also amplifies my race and ethnicity and cultivates an ancestral healing as a child of the diaspora. The work was performed by decoding personal medical data and manipulating my X-rays into specific, vivid, opaque colors that are synonymous with South Asian symbolism. Next slide, please. The Staph infection in 2017, performed at the National Theatre of Scotland. This was a one-woman installational performance that was set in a deconstructed medical institution and explored the doctor and patient relationship, as well as the ethics of intimacy and the disabled female form within the complexities of politics, of agency and power. The title, Staph Infection, is a double-edged homophone, a reconstruction of the post-traumatic into the political side of radical agency. It was a unapologetically honest, subversively humorous, intimate yet very uncomfortable reclamation of the multiple oppressions that shaped the lived experiences of disabled women. It was produced at the time in the wake of the Me Too movement, where disabled women were neglected, and the fact that statistically, within abuse and violence, disabled women experience twice the amount of abuse than non-disabled women, yet this is never highlighted in the media. Next slide, please. The last work is part of the hair archives. I utilized my own medication packets for months that were saved up and hair from episodes of trauma-induced alopecia. The work wields an artivist approach to kind of spotlight the drivers of social, political, and cultural oppressions that are experienced on a daily basis within minority communities. These drivers have been applied to personal and organic matter, such as hair and medication packets. The screen print on the table is conductive, and when our audience participates, stroking each hair, they are left with comments through the headphones, outlining comments that disabled women hear on a daily basis. Thank you.
So you've been talking about strategies of representation and how your body is represented. And right now, strategies of representation are more important than ever. So how do you address this idea of representation? Do you have a strategic way of representing it, or is it intuitive? Could you talk a little bit more about that and how it works through your art, please?
I think representation is undoubtedly evident from my multiple ways of being in the world, from feeling to knowing and putting lived experience at the heart of my work. I usually ensure that I utilize lived experience and connect this to the public sphere in some way, such as pain, which is a shared phenomenon. And although chronic pain and impairments, you don't really, even though that they are quite separate from the everyday of the general population, you don't need to be disabled to experience pain. And I start here and I find a small common shared link between the public and myself, and build upon this.
Well, I think it's quite remarkable how you take pain and you make it into something that's both shared, but somehow you also find beauty within it. Before I ask another question, would any of the other panelists like to comment on what Aminder has just said? Okay, I'm going to keep things going. Ashokkumar, you've talked about power and also the barriers to self-expression. I mean, we're in a time of change. It's really clear. We saw a photo of the Black Lives Matter movement right in front of the National Gallery, which I described as a fortress. I thought that couldn't have been more fortuitous. Now, when change is happening, people in power feel threatened, or people who thought they might have been able to participate in the existing structures. How do you think people in power should see themselves, and how can they help you and say people who relate to you gain access to the corridors of power? But let's also hope that once we have new generations in power, that we avoid the mistakes of the older generations. Do you have advice for us on that?
I think I do. One of the things that the pandemic has done is given us that kind of stop and that reset to kind of look back and look at the way we treat each other. And a lot of people are feeling, kind of obsolete almost, in a sense. And rather than feeling obsolete and rather than kind of lashing out, what people in power should really be doing is to open the door and start to become collaborators, start to let people who who traditionally haven't had a place within the arts to kind of work with them. And that way it's a kind of accession in a way. I mean, some of these people will probably be coming to the end of their careers, but rather than kind of maintaining the status quo by just kind of digging their heels in, what they really need to do is start to think as a collaborator, think about accession and think about progress.
Maybe there's a chance for people who are later in their career to take more chances too. And I would encourage my colleagues to do that. I'm going to combine a question that came up from the panelists and also from our audience member, which has to do with how the pandemic has helped the progression of accessible art, specifically art that, like this conference, which may have been held in person at one point, is now all art is media art, one way or another, although maybe some of it's more mediated art than media art. But through COVID-19, a shift seems to have taken place. And Olive, Maria, and anybody else, could you please tell me your thoughts on that? Have you felt that your art is more accessible, or that the attitudes towards media art, as opposed to, say, mediated art, say NT Live, are changing?
Maybe I can just answer briefly from my perspective. I mean, last year we all definitely felt the shift, and as Art in Flux, we are obviously all working with media art, we're all practicing media artists, and still we had to completely reconsider where we are and how we can reconnect with one another and also create new tools. And really think about access, I guess, in this context. So for us, thinking about virtual spaces, real spaces, but also what does access mean? Suddenly you have a global audience and you've got collaborators around the globe that you're dealing with. There's all new considerations that come into play in terms of global access, digital literacy, but also in terms of being able to connect to virtual spaces that we're operating in. So I think it was a steep learning curve, and I think for us we definitely learned a lot through it. And this is actually part of this wider discussion. So this thinking about access is something that is also quite new to us as an organization.
Well, maybe one of your colleagues could answer the next part of that question is, do you think this is going to be a persistent or a permanent change?
I'll take it from here. I believe it is, because to my surprise, also when you, last year I had to, I was offered to curate the digital weekend, their media art festival. And first it was planned to be done in a physical space. And we had to like in a month to change it all to be made online. And to my surprise, I was very happy of how, you know, having to make the experience online, completely online, give us the opportunity to really open accessibility. Then we had like people writing us that that they were like wheelchair users, they couldn't access to the theaters, and then all of a sudden we were taking the theaters to their houses, and also it was very important for us to try to make it using accessible technology. So any that it was any screen, anyone with a screen could be used, and because of that, and because of what Olive has said about being able to reach an international audience, I think this movement is here to stay with us. And I think this is why, like, we will be looking at like more hybrid type of events where we always an online side will be present. And I think it's to be rewarded and to celebrate it because of the accessibility that offers, that usually in life you can kind of have those access, and it's gained thanks to technology. Yeah.
Well, I think that question of access is really one to go on. The audience seems to have a lot of interest too. Helen, you've been doing amazing work on access for many years now, using cutting-edge technologies. What role do you think both independent art institutions and hopefully institutions such as the National Gallery, through our much more agile wing, National Gallery X, can help improve access?
So one thing I would say is I have just loved certain aspects of the pandemic. One of the things we're talking about is that we've jumped into the future by 30 years. That, we were where we are now. Those of us who are in the field always knew that this was coming, but there's been this massive jump because of the pandemic. So those of us in the field who are waiting for it's just never been more exciting or more busy. So, for someone like me, for example, who's I'll speak in a very specific way. I work with Danielle Braithwaite Shirley. We are both obsessed with this notion of as Black women being abstracted from this new canon. And one of the things, so I'm working with Danielle, and before the pandemic, she was saying that she wanted to do a game bundle with women of color based around, certain themes. So before this happened, this would really have been a challenge. But what actually happened is through the Spur network, I was able to put together a group of women of color from all over the world and skill them up. These were women who'd never worked with technology, but we were able to skill share. I brought in artists like Salma Noor, who's a Black hijabi. She was working and directly teaching Nayu Kim, who's a disabled artist from South Korea. And we, I messaged Danielle about 2 days ago saying, we're ready. I've got 6 women of color and we're ready for whenever you're ready with your game bundle to go. That would have been impossible, before the pandemic. And this is a very real example of access and how we've been able to jump into the future and work together in this incredible way and be able to support each other during the pandemic and check in with each other. I'll just say something about within the Black, I'm part of a Black curatorial group that's been set up by the amazing Languid hands. And it's been so important for us as Black curators because there are not very many of us. So we're geographically at different places. And this has allowed us to come together in private so that we can discuss particular problems that are particular to our communities, so that we can build strategies and develop tactics for going forward, and shared language as well for how we're going to tackle problems that we all face. So that's, I mean, for me, I've always been pro-tech, so for me, it's just been incredible.
Yeah, you've done some really remarkable things under difficult circumstances. So it seems like the pandemic has accelerated some of this change. But one of the questions has come from the audience, and maybe I'm going to direct it to Helen, but Ashokkumar, perhaps you could start thinking about it too. What's the trend been during the last, say, 10 or 20 years? I think specifically Ashokkumar, because he's been working that long. Helen, I'm not sure about you, but yeah. Has there been a trend towards more access, and has the pandemic amplified or accelerated this positively? How do you see this? So
I say again, so I think the way that I think that, and I'll speak from institutions. So I'm lucky enough to work with wonderful institutions and wonderful people in institutions. Shout out to Quad, shout out to FACT. But I think of things in terms of that either you're into wake work, or if you're into status work, right? So there's so many people in the arts, that's about status work. That is about using the arts to build your cultural capital, to build your status, and exhibitions and gatherings in particular places. That is what it's about, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. People like status. You're allowed to have your status and, do what you want with it. And there's a place within the art canon for that sort of artwork. For me, I'm very much into the wake work. So I come from, I came up with the YBAs. I'm that old. Like, that was the end of this period, which was really exciting, where art was like really political. Artists there was no market. That's another really important thing I wanted to say around media art and media artists. There was no market. So you knew if you were talking to an artist that was a serious artist who was making their practice. So wake work, which is where I think we are now, you can tell from public programs, you can tell from the institutions, just looking through their public programs, that politics is on the agenda again, climate change, trans discussion, Black discussion, disability discussion, crypt theory. It's sort of all coming out. And I would say that there's certain people, this is a moment in history where people decide what side of history do you want to be on with regards to the visual arts. Do you want to remain as status workers, or do you want to take part in like this wake work renaissance?
That's a great transition actually to the inflection I want to give to Ashokkumar, because Ashokkumar, you want to be known as a media artist. Identity doesn't necessarily play a role in this for you. So how do you resolve, first is the question about, have you found access increasing? And I'm a media artist myself, so I know how tough it is to place things. But what's your take on this? Have things gotten easier? And do you have a different take on, say, an identity-based approach as opposed to a medium-based approach to art, which is what you seem to be taking?
There's a lot to unpick here. What I would say,
try to do it in 3 minutes.
Very, very quickly. Access is very much an awakening. but the problem is that it's how it's actually interpreted. I look at research like, for instance, I was looking at some research that looked at that whole that old epithet, "you all look the same." There's some actual science behind that, about the fact that you only actually get to understand people who are different to you when you take the time to understand the nuances between them. I draw a lot of research from other areas to actually look at access and look at identity as well, and try and kind of internalize some of that. In terms of myself, I prefer to just be called an artist now. There was a time when I referred to myself as a media artist or a new media artist, but neurologically, I'm kind of flowing in all sorts of directions. So just the word artist is enough for me. I think with people like Kaising Tan and Ranjita Dittal, who have set up the neurodiversity group, there's a real explosion of kind of awareness around neurodiversity, and some of the great work that organizations like Disability Arts Online and DASH and so on are doing. They're actually bringing disability into the forefront of the area, but there still is a resistance. I think there is still a sense of well, this is a fad and it's going to kind of blow into the wind. But I think on one side, the people that are kind of invested aren't going to let that happen. But then on the other side, there's a real sense that there's a real kind of attitude amongst a lot of organizations that this is kind of like a minor area. Disability and media art is self-contained in its own right, but I think it really needs to be brought into the mainstream a lot more vigorously. Yeah, that's what I'd say.
Yeah, that's a really good perspective to bring, and I think it's one that we all share. Would anybody else like to comment on that before I go to the next question? Ala, Maria, do you have anything to say? Aphra?
Aminder wants to say something.
Okay.
I think the digital space opens up a world of opportunity that makes access really exciting, creative, a technical challenge. But at the same time, disabled artists have utilized media technologies for decades. We're embedded with media technologies in our bodies. We're cyborgs. And it's really important to ensure that the art sector aims the lens on the disabled and neurodiverse artists at this time during the pandemic, especially when disabled people are hit the hardest. And it's common that within digital art, which combines media, science, technology, disabled people are usually seen as passive inspiration for non-disabled people rather than activators of art and STEM. And it's really important that this gets a full coverage within this space and time.
I couldn't agree more with you, Aminder. In fact, National Gallery X, under my sort of guidance, is opening a channel for neurodiversity and neurodiverse artists. And we actually want to use what we learn from the arts program as a form of R&D to build more inclusive societies and more inclusive architectures. So to continue that line of thought, what do you think, what could we do to make a more inclusive environment for neurodiverse artists or neurodivergent artists in the art world? What would you do? What would make the space more inclusive for you overall? Whether it be a technical reorganization or a ministerial reorganization, or does it have to do with anything that would make it easier for you to work within the current, well, let's not say the current environment. Let's think about what the environment could be that made it more inclusive and lowered some of these barriers.
I think it's important to ensure it goes beyond tick boxing, and that disabled artists are used in the consulting process for programs as well. I think that is really important to ensure that inclusivity is embedded from the start and not an afterthought, which can be really difficult.
Thank you very much for that. We have a question, and this is one that I want to honor. I'm not sure if anybody can answer it, but we do have a question about wheelchair access. And, this is something that legacy institutions struggle with because they weren't built for people with wheelchairs. And we've actually got old pictures of people trying to enter the National Gallery even 100 years ago in wheeled vehicles. But would anybody like to take that up and talk about how media art can help people with physical access issues and mobility issues? If not, I could talk about it a bit too, but I'd prefer to throw it to one of you to just jump in.
Whatever is done has to be done from the perspective of collaboration. So it's about artists working with people with disabilities or with other artists with disabilities to actually kind of create new work that goes in new directions, that is specifically accessible. One of the things I particularly like to do is to look at these things that we use for access, like voiceovers and what they called captions and so on and so forth, and make them actually part of the work. So they're not just an adjunct, they're not just something that you add on at the end, but they become an intrinsic part of the work. And in the same way, we can do similar things with other forms of access. We can actually make them part of the actual work themselves.
Thanks very much for that. Now, I'd like to talk about Black Lives Matter and, now some of the even more recent movements around, women's mobility issues at nights. And, we've been talking about neurodivergency and the various, Me Too in all of its manifestations. And I'd like to direct this question to Aphra Shemza and say, Aphra, how have these movements provided a lens for either your artistic and or your institutional practices? Because you're both an artist, a curator, and a very able administrator, I have to add.
Yes, very able administrator. Yes, I think for me, I have a South Asian background. My grandfather was a Pakistani artist that came over to London in the 50s. Although my lived experience is very much a white one, but I have this Islamic cultural heritage, and I'm very influenced by that within my art practice and with my ideas about curation. And my most recent project, which was called Shemza Digital, which was about introducing my grandfather's work to the younger generation as a way to start to think about decolonizing the art world and introducing migrant artists who haven't really had their rightful places within British art history at the moment. And really there's been a kind of resurgence in this thinking. And in the last 10 years in my work working with the estate of my grandfather, I've seen that there's been a recognition of these artists, these migrant artists like Rashida Rayin, Frank Bowling, my grandfather, etc., all kind of having this resurgence, and academics and institutions are now interested in their work, and there's a rethinking of this. And I think with Black Lives Matter was really poignant for me, and I mentioned in the slides last year, because it's a huge movement that used social technologies in an incredible way to basically get the message, massively educate to millions of people globally very quickly about racism and oppression, and suddenly there was this movement about people trying to educate themselves and trying to understand, could they do anything to help, or just learning. And I think that's one of the things with social technologies and new media that really has the ability to kind of sweep across the world. Same with, Me Too movement and things like that. I think Helen wants to say something, so I'll pass over.
I really wanted to say when we are, one of the things with my particular practice that I am trying to embody is a notion of duty of care. I think if people really, really understood what a caring practice, a caring institution was, none of this discussion would be needed, because a duty of care means that everyone becomes held in safety and in love. If you have a space that's safe, then it should support every single marginalized group. So for example, I have lots of dear friends who are non-visible disabled, and they struggle with what that means, because they're too afraid to out themselves, to face that stigma. But their lives would be so much easier if people understood that they actually had neurological issues and weren't just simply being hypersensitive or so. In all of this discussion that we're talking about, we really are just talking about duty of care practice. And I think we really have to be mindful not to get into what we call diversity Olympics.
Yes,
right?
that's a good point. We're actually out of time. We're running over, but this has been such an exciting discussion, and there's such an exciting question from the audience that I would like to just do a quick round through every panelist and try to do it in 1 minute. If you need 90 seconds, that's okay, but just cut yourself off, please, because we don't want to overrun our audience's patience, and there's some really important announcements for the end of this. But could you please, and I'll just name you off as I see you on the screen, describe what your vision of the future of inclusive art, where everybody has access to the tools of self-expression and to audiences, looks like. So Helen, you're up right now. Can you brevity is the
Carnival, that's super easy for me. If you want to see what that looks like, have a look at what Trinidad Carnival and the night carnival looks like. You will see a participatory culture.
Well, if you could, while everybody else is talking, look up a good link and send our audience a link about Trinidad Carnival. That would be wonderful. So, okay, I'll go on now to Oliver. Oliver, what's your vision for the a utopian future?
Yeah, maybe I can just chime in on what Helen said. I think this idea of participatory art and kind of the dissolve between audience and artists and this disconnect, I think that will just cease as we have more collaborative tools and we can work together and we learn from each other. I think that's really the key thing, this culture of openness and listening culture, really. So yeah, that's my hope for the future. I'm going to keep it brief.
Okay, Aphra, anything on your part?
I love the idea of the duty of care, which Helen touched on. I think that's a really important point about thinking about, how we think about things. But I also thinking in terms of the future, participatory art, digital art forms as a way to include the public in different ways. So there's the idea of educating for social change, and that really is about working with young people and children. Recently we did some workshops with Flux that were digital art workshops with young children that had never ever heard of digital art before, so we totally blew their minds, and I think through these incredible technologies and artists and collaboration we can kind of work towards a better world.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Maria, let's hear from you. Oh, we need your...
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I couldn't find the button. For me, I want to echo, I see the future as a participatory, really enhancing the participatory aspects of the arts, and also how to create kind of custom software tools that can be really more targeted and really can fulfill the needs of the particular groups, like really to reach to reach and to serve to diversity. We have, how to really use tools like technology, and I think like creating a custom software tools that can really, can really be targeted to make the world more accessible. Also, I would like to see a world where the resources are just more like equally spread and shared. We have so many resources to share, and I think we have to, again, the duty of care and the idea of like we create to share. Let's remember that, to share with all.
Ashokkumar, what do you have to say about this? What's your utopia?
I'll try and be quick as I can.
Other than a great show.
Two things are kind of like a move away from this celebrity culture, the kind of seeing particular artists, through that kind of ka-ching kind of mentality. And the other one is kind of really tackling education, art education. I mean, we've had the study back in 2015 from the RCA, the Royal College of Art, which found that 29% of their students were dyslexic, were neurodivergent, that as opposed to kind of 5 to 10% of the population. So we need to understand that people with disabilities, people who are neurodivergent, really gravitate towards the arts because it is about kind of expressing themselves, and that really needs to be bought into by the arts establishment.
Well, thank you very much. Aminder, would you like to have the final word on anything?
For me, it would be a authentically intersectional framework for artists that are amplified for being artists, not just because they're from marginalized communities, but for the beauty of their work and who they are. And also, as the arts movement is predominantly white-led, as is the disability arts movement, to ensure that disabled people of color are at the forefront of that.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you very much to our panelists. And I also want to give a special thank you to Maria O'Brien, who has made this text accessible. She's been the one who's been transcribing this in real time, not an easy job, as you can imagine. So please, virtual and real claps to Maria. I'd like to thank Art in Flux and the artists for participating in this, and especially the audience. As usual, without the audience, we wouldn't exist. But I wasn't able to get to all of the questions that I know people wanted to talk to, either on the panel or in the audience. But please know that those questions have not just evaporated. They're not soaking into the ground. We are taking them very seriously at National Gallery X, and it is going to influence our policies and our recommendations, which will work its way up through the various labyrinthine corridors of the UK cultural establishment. So I would like now to hand it off back to Art in Flux to talk about some upcoming events. I think this virtual exhibition that they've done in Trafalgar Square is really exciting, because actually that brings us full circle to the fact that we are basically storming a fortress, or trying to enter a fortress, but there are these very hard permeable barriers, and some of the barriers are physical, some of them are social, they're all psychological. And tonight, I think we've made a very, very good amount of progress in depolarizing society and bringing people of many different kinds with many different perspectives together. So I thank you all for that. It's been very, very successful. Let's all clap our organizers for this, and give them a good clap, everybody, and our artists. Thank you. And over to Aphra, I think, who is going to talk about some of the exhibitions that are coming up, including future events with National Gallery X. Good night.
Thank you so much, Ali. And yeah, thank you to National Gallery X for hosting us. As Ali mentioned, do feel free to explore our virtual exhibition. It is now live and online, thanks to the support of the Arts Council England, and we will drop the link in the chat. And a huge thank you to all the artists who were involved in the exhibition, and also our exhibition designer, Chris McInnes. And tomorrow, Art in Flux is co-hosting the Movement Conference at the University of Greenwich, where Maria Almena will be presenting her practice alongside artists such as the Lumen Prize winners, Boredom Research. The event is free, so feel free to sign up on the link posted in the chat.
And Shemza Digital is featured within our virtual exhibition, and this Good Friday we're collaborating with the Northern Farm Art Centre to offer 2 workshops, one for families and children and one for young people, to learn how to create their own digital paintings and consider the place of migrant art within British art history. This year, we're also delighted to share with you that we have 3 more events coming up with the National Gallery X. The Invisible in June is curated by Olive Gingrich. It looks at multisensory experiences and the quest to make invisible phenomena visible. Transcendence, curated by Maria Almena, is an exploration of the art behind creating mystical experiences, and Radical Ecology is curated by myself and explores media art and sustainability. So join our newsletter to keep up to date with this year's programme.
We will also love to share a couple of events from our speakers. Helen Starr is opening a Spur World this week on the 1st of April, a virtual exhibition consisting of 14 virtual worlds, working within themes and representations of mysticism, ritual, and the natural world. The collective utilized game engineering technology to form complex yet cohesive narratives. Also, Aminder Virdee has 2 upcoming events. The first, What You Do Not See, is an online exhibition by Watermans and CPP Hansel, which brings together the work of 7 UK-based contemporary visual artists, illuminating what it is to live with a hidden disability. Also, A Thing That Holds Something Else is an exhibition for Alchemy Moving Image and Film Festival in 2021. Do check them out. Now, to wrap it all up, we would love to send huge thank you from Art in Flux to our speakers, Helen Starr, Aminder Virdee, and Ashokkumar Mistry, as well as to Ali Hossaini for hosting us, and the amazing National Gallery team, Chris Michaels, Ian Warren, and Aaron Ali. Thanks so much to all the audience for watching. We hope you enjoy the events. Remember, you can join our newsletter to stay updated for our next projects. All the best. Thank you.